stonily at our hero during the weighing in. Jim had to go completely out of character to achieve a belligerent mien, but he did, it worked, and Bear turned up that evening as a joke, champion in defense of his crown. What Maxie Bear will do in his current effort to regain the top is a matter of much doubt. I hardly feel it will avail him anything more than perhaps a few thousands of dollars, but from all I hear, he can use those. All in all, the Livermore Larriper was not among the most exemplary of our heavyweight champions. The consensus opinion at this time is that Ted Weeman, Michigan class of 1921, will be the new head football coach at Princeton University. Weeman would be an excellent and a logical choice. He is a scholarly, alert gentleman. He knows football, as much football as Fritz Chrysler, who just resigned the job in Tigertown at an unhappy time, as much football in all probability as any coach in the country. There are two schools of thought among Princeton men. Their suggestion of bitterness that a graduate coach couldn't have done worse with the material at hand than did Chrysler last season. The old boys, and those who are demanding a Princeton man for the Princeton team are largely the old boys, have something there. The Tigers weren't world beaters last autumn. They weren't as bad as they were made to look throughout most of the season either. Chrysler handled what was an average squad of present-day college players as though he were getting ready for the junior prom or possibly the Christmas vacation. He started the year by saying the boys were a couple of years away and that too much should not be expected from them. Since a player's varsity career is only 3 years at best, if he is 2 years away in his sophomore year, perhaps he should have stood in bed. Speaking with what some may consider brutal frankness, I never thought Chrysler got quite the maximum out of what looked to be a remarkably fine squad. This is strictly a personal opinion, quite possibly an unfair one. Perhaps those fleet and lean-flanked Tigers looked better to the repertorial eye than they really were. Perhaps they were picture players, and Yale and the Kellys and the Franks really had their number when the blue chips were placed. This much, however, strikes me as almost a sure thing. Either it must be Weeman for the next couple of seasons, or the Princeton people must adjust themselves to face another period of lean Tiger picking. Even if Caldwell is the best coach ever, which he may be for all I know, he cannot walk into the job on the eve of spring practice without assistance and hope to get anywhere at all in 1938 or very far by 1939. Systems in football are more hooey than otherwise, but a head coach's job on the big time is no solo flight. He can't do it with mirrors, not against the Messrs. Pond, Neal, and Houdini Hollow at Harvard. And against the Messrs. Pond, Neal, and Houdini Hollow at Harvard he can't. Thus Chrysler, however reluctantly, lets Princeton in a spot where it will take Weeman and like him, or take another series of lacings and like those. Your pays your money for your AA ticket and takes your pick. That's the setup at the Oxford of the Pennsylvania Railroad at the moment. This week marks the opening of undoubtedly the finest radio station layout in the country. Not as large as some perhaps, yet WTAM will enjoy much added prestige when its genial manager Vernon Pribble throws open the doors of the sumptuous new studios in the NBC building. WTAM has played an important part in the development of radio in Cleveland, and in the friendly spirit of competition which marks the field here, it is a pleasure to call to your attention this new forward step in Cleveland radio. To me, WTAM's new studios, Cleveland radio. To me, WTAM's new studios have added significance, for its rapid growth has been paced by a radio figure whose name I knew long before I entered the game, a young man whom I greatly admire, and whose admirers here and throughout the nation match in numbers those large groups who follow the talents of the finest of network stars. Back in 1919, those baseball fans who were watching Tris Speaker build the Indians into world champions saw a red-headed youngster wielding a megaphone come out to the plate at the beginning of each game, meet the umpires and managers of the competing teams, and then announce to the fans the batters and lineups for the day. Radio was then in its infancy. Few homes had even the most modest of experimental sets. And with his megaphone, Tom Manning, a product of Cleveland's West Side, had little vision then that his name would one day be known in every radio home. His $2.50 a day looked mighty fine, although his eye, even at that time, was $1.50 a day looked mighty fine, although to handle a radio program announcing the scores late each afternoon. $3 a day for a few minutes of talk looked like easy money, and all he needed was permission of the ball club. Walter McNichols, then traveling secretary of the tribe, had the boys' interest at heart. He went directly to the station, told them $3 was not enough, raised the figure to $5, and then went back to the park to tell Tom the thing was set. In 1927, WTAM began the first series of baseball broadcasts in the history of Cleveland radio. Arriving at the ballpark the opening afternoon of that 1927 season, Tom was told by Carl Berg, the popular gateman at the press entrance, that he was wanted upstairs. A moment later, he stepped inside the door to Billy Evans' office and heard in curt words, "You're fired." And then Billy added, "Wait a minute outside and I'll talk to you." A short time later, Billy Evans came out and instructed Tom to follow. Down the stairs and through the long passageway under the stands, the two walked without a word, continued without speaking right up to the press box. A half hour later, Tom Manning sat beside Billy Evans and assisted in the first broadcast of a Cleveland ball game. The next day, he took over the reins alone, and since then, he has always been on the air for TAM. Still working at JAY at that time, however, he made half a slip one afternoon, and during the play-by-play broadcast over WTAM, almost gave the wrong station call. TAM was then owned by the Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company, and the next day, Tom stood before the board of directors. He did most of the convincing at that meeting, and he left there that afternoon a full member of the WTAM staff. In 1929, he was first heard on a World Series broadcast, and today, 9 years later, he is the veteran. 9 years later, he is the veteran sports announcer of the nation. His voice has been carried to all corners of the land with descriptions of baseball and football games. To all corners of the land with descriptions of baseball and football games, from the ringsides of countless fights, from the scenes of all kinds of special events. He has that peculiar ability, far above that of any announcer I have ever heard, of giving color to and a glowing word picture of an affair that through the voice of another might seem dull. For 4 years I have sat at his elbow in the press box at League Park. To know him is to realize how large a part he is of Cleveland radio. With the passing years, new names are added to others on Cleveland. With the passing years, new names are added to others on Cleveland radio stations. New voices talk sports and tell sports stories. But none have matched, and I feel none can match, the red-headed young Irishman who began behind a megaphone at League Park and came to the microphone before the whole nation. The Sports Week in Cleveland will be of broad enough range to please the most exacting fans. The league-leading barons will be on the road, but boxing and hockey, college and amateur hockey, college-based basketball will give the arena plenty of attraction. Wednesday night, Walter Taylor features Ernie Dusick and Everett Marshall at a wrestling show at Central Armory. And on Saturday, Cleveland will be the scene of, we hope, a title boxing match. The advent of Freddie Steele, who wears that somewhat tarnished middleweight crown to Cleveland, is involved in a little fog. But until I have seen his match with Tom and Bart, I prefer to reserve my opinion. Cleveland boxing cannot stand anything but a real battle above board, and shooting the whole works. One noon last week, I sat down at lunch with a young man whom I have known for many years. We started to speak of sports, but an item in the day's news had caught our eyes, and we discussed it. William Randolph Hearst's proposal for a humane code to regulate modern warfare. Neither of us remembered it then, but the recollection came to me only as I sat down to prepare this broadcast, that exactly 20 years before, to the day and to the hour, we had been playing stud poker in the Red Lion Inn in Soissons. I know it was the day because on Lincoln's birthday in 1918, the 26th, the Yankee Division, moved up to the Chimanda Dam to take over its first front-line assignment on the Western Front. And I know it was to the hour because we played most all day, and I won beaucoup francs. A fellow doesn't forget things like that, not a fellow with my luck. We were moving through the shell-torn streets of Soissons before this, and because this friend with whom I was lunching was a guy from the 101st, we didn't meet again for 15 years. Now we see one another every few days around town. Last week he recalled a piece I had given over the radio some time ago and repeated many times before high school assemblies since, a piece about a kid going to war. That was a story addressed to a couple of youngsters I overheard talking about wanting to grow up and go to war. One of them wanted to be in the cavalry, and the other wished to be an aviator and blow a house all to pieces. But their broadcast action was that when he talked of the thrill it would be to blow a whole house to bits, if he had thought who might happen to be in the house at the time, perhaps his mother or his little sister. He hadn't thought of that. From what we see in the pictures from Spain and China these days, the young aviators who are flying there must not think of it either. I saw a house knocked over by a bomb once, a tiny little motion picture house in the town of Meaux. The place was bombed around midnight, long after the show had closed. It was bright moonlight of a summer night, and as quiet and peaceful in Meaux as it is in Cleveland this night, before that bomb screeched down. You wouldn't have to let your imagination run exactly right to make it Cleveland if things keep on in the world as they're going now, would you? Well, there wasn't much left of the little theater, or the mother and the two little girls who lived in it and ran it because their dad was already dead in the war. Just the twisted frame of what had been a kid's iron bedstead, some torn and bloody cloth, some trinkets and sea cloth, some trinkets and pots and pans, a stove split in half, a tinted picture of Papa in his horizon blue uniform. Just those things were left that make a home. I said to the boy who wanted to blow up a whole house that I guessed the German boy who pulled that lever wouldn't have felt proud of blowing things all to pieces if he could have seen the rescue squad trying to piece Mama and the two little girls together for a Christian burial. When you stop to think about it, there isn't much sense in shooting people you can't see and never have seen. And someone may have won this last war, and someone may feel mighty proud about it, but it wasn't the young men who were up there in the mud dodging bullets 20 years ago. And that was a good war, little more than a picnic, apparently, to these non-war days they are having in the world at this time. A file of German prisoners would come shuffling down the road in the twilight, and suddenly you'd be startled to hear one of them ask, "What outfit, bud?" "I'm Schultz from St. Louis." Ever? Bad enough to switch to try to kill back. But women and children and the old feeble and harmless ones of this strange world of ours, well, that's something that takes us back to barbarism and beyond. Enough of that. It doesn't seem possible that it was 20 years ago since the 26 went swinging up toward the Champagne along the road of Our Lady, singing as it went, "Lady,